Over the years, as the Halo art style has evolved, we've also seen the visor style within every Spartan through different Halo iterations change as well. And while we've only seen a limited look as to what we can expect from Halo Infinite, we did want to take a look at the evolution of Halo visors throughout the years and also talk about which ones were the absolute best and which ones we weren't personally fans of. Now, in the Master Chief Collection, we've actually seen visors added in, which are really cool in their own sense that we're getting new content, and we'll talk about those ones a little bit later, but we wanted to start things off by looking at how things changed between Combat Evolved and Halo 2. Besides the fact that when we saw the jump to Halo 2, we saw a pretty significant visor change. In general, Master Chief just overwent a design where he went from a more solid color design to a more complex and shinier design, and in that first debut trailer we saw for Halo 2, we actually saw a version of Master Chief where his visor was reflective, which was a plan that they had for Halo 2 to have real-time reflections coming off of the Master Chief's visor, which ended up getting pushed out of the game and wasn't added back in till Halo 3. Though I do have to say there's something special about the original Combat Evolved visor when you're looking at that box art cover and you see his visor and the reflection of what's going on. It kind of just captured the essence of you're going to be experiencing things through this character's eyes, and it's just really well done. And later on, even what we got in the final build of Halo 2, the visor still looked pretty reflective and was a big jump in improvement graphic-wise. But Halo 3 came out and it completely changed the game, and to this day I will still argue, I will die on this hill, Halo 3 visors are the absolute pinnacle of Halo visors that we've had so far. There's something about the way that the reflections look. I just absolutely love every single helmet variation that you can see the visor on. Maybe some people will argue it went for too much of a shiny and clean approach, but honestly, just the way that this visor looks makes it look like the pinnacle best quality gear that they would put on a Spartan of this caliber. And with all of the new customization options that were added into Halo 3 and the different helmets we were now able to choose when Halo 3 rolled around, just being able to have different types of helmets that made your own character stand out unique but still felt like it meshed with the in-lore universe of Master Chief and the world of the Spartan program, it just seemed really fitting, and I just loved the way that it looked. And maybe it's my own personal love for Halo 3, but I feel like this is one of the reasons why I always really like the gold looking visors in all the later Halo games, because of the way that Halo 3 kind of brought that consistency across the way that all the Spartans looked at the time. Even up until this point, we had seen ODSTs in Halo before with Halo 2 and Halo 3, and typically they either had a blue or silverish visor color, but when I saw an ODST with a gold visor, I was like, huh, now what's this ODST's story in my weird 14-year-old headcanon? And even though it was just a cosmetic difference that you could do for the multiplayer side of things, it was just something that was really cool and something that I really appreciated, and it kind of played a big impact to how I analyzed future iterations of the art style when it came to Halo. And then what was really cool was when ODST rolled around, they ended up using a blue visor, of course, for the ODSTs, but it just seemed really fitting with the mood and aesthetic that they were going for in New Mombasa. But then when Halo Reach came around, I actually was really conflicted as to how I felt with the visor appearances in this game. Now, it's interesting just because with Halo Reach, I really did appreciate the grittier art style that they ended up going for, because it felt thematic to the story that they were trying to tell in Halo Reach to begin with. But for the first time ever, we had a Halo game where our Spartans starting off with the default visor was much different than the standard gold visor color we had seen in previous iterations. It still stayed somewhat true to the consistency of what we've seen out of Halo before, but it definitely wasn't that same bright and shiny reflective gold we had in Halo 3 and before that. Nonetheless, I didn't hate the default colored visor, and the other visors that were introduced in Reach was the first time we had more customization back in the day, and that was something I really appreciated, so I think I was more or less okay with the change in style when it came to the way that the visors came across, even though for whatever reason visors had become something so incredibly important to me, maybe to a point where it's a little bit weird of an obsession. But at the end of the day, we had the default visor, which was okay. The silver visor kind of looked like we took the default visor and maybe sprayed some Windex on it and kind of cleaned it up, and then that's the visor that we maybe always had the whole time. The blue visor was a really warm welcome, especially just after having ODST come out. It was a cool, respectable homage, and the fact that the blue visor fit into the Reach art style really well worked out. Now, when it came to the black visor, I actually ended up hating the way that this visor looked in Halo Reach. Maybe more so in Halo Halo Reach than any other Halo visor. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the black visor theoretically is a really cool visor, and if you like running the black visor, I totally understand why, and I think it's alright, but for whatever reason, the way that the black visor looked in Halo Reach in-game didn't seem to represent the same way that the visors should have looked back in that time. Typically, since these are visors, I felt like the fact that the coloration on it was such a matte, solid black color took away some of the things that I really liked about the other versions of the Spartan helmets we've seen over the years. Interestingly enough, if you look at the black visor in the Master Chief Collection on Reach that's powered by a different engine, it actually looks really good. It has that black sunglass reflection on it, which is what I would expect a visor like this to look like. However, for whatever reason, in Reach itself, the visor never actually looks like this. It just looks like someone put black paint covering up the visor and whoever's in there can't see anything. I know it's a really weird nitpick, and this is just my own personal opinion, not something that reflects the thoughts of everyone else in the community, but it was something that I felt very strongly about back in the day, though the things that happened later on in Halo kind of changed the way that I perceived some of the visors. Halo Reach also marked the end of an era where we had this hyper reflective look that we had in Halo 3, and that wouldn't be brought back for Halo 4 or later iterations, really. Going into Halo 4, it's really easy for me to jump back into my typical bandwagon rants about art style change directions. When it actually came to the visors, I was pretty optimistic and positive towards a lot of the decisions that were made when Halo 4 released. Firstly, the large amount of different visor colors that you could have in Halo 4 was a really warm welcome. There was just so many more options than what was originally available in Reach, and that was really cool, and my complaint with the black visor kind of was fixed up a little bit with Halo 4 in the art style that they ended up going with for this game. Halo 4 releasing had me hyped for all the different possibilities, and even though I ended up settling on a classic gold visor type aesthetic, I still like that there were other options out there to begin with. Though if I had to make one main complaint with Halo 4, the fact that they started everyone off with a blue visor just kind of seemed really jarring and out of place for Halo. Even in Reach, they decided to keep a color that at least was reminiscent to what they had in the past, where blue just seemed like a very dramatic change, and it kind of marked the entire Spartan 4 program differently from previous iterations of the Spartan program. And I think people looking back, seeing a blue visor on a Spartan might immediately trigger them memories of Halo 4 for better or worse. But if I was a game designer, which I'm definitely not, I might have made the decision to have everyone start off with a more neutral visor color and then unlock all of the different colors later on. Because back in Reach, there was something really cool about unlocking different visor colors like the blue one, and just having it on day one in Halo 4 was definitely something different. Then we get to Halo 5 Guardians, and on one hand, there's a lot of good things I would say, like the amount of variety in visors is kind of cool, but on the other hand, I've been struggling a lot with liking the detail that went into the visor that was originally introduced in Halo 4, but really heavily pushed onto Halo 5, where every single visor typically has this over hexagonal, polygonal type shape covering the entire material that makes the visor. Now, in general, it seems like these hexagons that are used in Halo 5's art style show up everywhere when it comes to a Spartan, and it just seems excessive for it also to be on the visor itself. For whatever reason, the pilot helmet doesn't have this, and it has that classic reflective thing that I absolutely love, but why can't I take that style or that material that's on that visor and put it on my other helmets? Just a pet peeve of mine. They also started adding in different things like mixture colors in Halo 5, and they are kind of cool with the way that the colors reflect differently off of light, and I am incredibly optimistic with Halo Infinite and what I've seen so far, with the possibility that these visors are going to maybe return a bit to the roots, and they look extra shiny and extra reflective, and I am really excited about that. The Master Chief Collection, of course, though, has seen the most recent update to older Halo games getting visor updates. So far, we've seen extra visors added into Combat Evolved and also into Halo 3. And you know, Halo 3's my baby when it comes to visors, so I actually would have a really strong opinion when this stuff got implemented. And honestly, for the most part, between Combat Evolved and Halo 3, the addition of visors is actually something I think is really cool. Halo Combat Evolved already doesn't have a lot of options to let your character stand out, and I think the way that they implemented the new visor colors didn't seem too jarring and too much of a massive change or overhaul. And while neither Luke or I are a fan of every single color added in, there's still enough really cool ones that we think made enough of a difference that it was overall a pretty positive addition to the game. And I think the same thing could also be said for Halo 3, and as much as I really would love to try try and use different visor colors, every time I change it up, it just doesn't feel quite right. So I go back to that classic gold color that I've been using all of these years. But the way that these visor colors didn't necessarily change the overall visor design is something I appreciate, and it makes me optimistic that in the future, if this approach is used for Halo Infinite, for example, we could have some really great looking Spartans once again. And while it's just a small key feature in a specific part of a Halo character, it's something that I've really looked into and analyzed and maybe overanalyzed for years. So it's cool to kind of get to talk about that a little bit and point out the changes and evolution we've seen from the visors. But which visor is your guys' favorite? Let us know in the comments down below. Also, if you guys didn't know we had a podcast, you can check it out. There's a link in the description. You can listen to our latest episodes over there. But otherwise, that's it for today. We'll see you all next time.